what was your history with death when you first heard it? Like, I'm sure, in those early days with Mantis and death, like when did you come into the fold with all that?
Well, there was a really good scene around here, in like 83 with Nancy Savage and Sabotage. And so we were all into buying all the records and stuff from all the cool underground stuff, metal, and death metal wasn't even really a thing yet, there was Bathory were just kind of starting and Venom and stuff. So anyhow, we heard about this band from Orlando called Mantis. And so at a Nasty Savage concert, I think it was in 1984, early 84, somewhere around there. Whenever that Mantis demo first came out, Chuck was walking around the club. They were playing at a place called Ruby's, a little tiny little place, and I saw a dude walking around with like a Ziploc bag with demos inside. And Bill Andrews said, "Hey, that's Chuck. That's that Mantis demo I told you about. You should go buy one." So I went over and talked to him for a little bit and bought a tape from him. We just talked about music, what was cool at the time, and that was it. So that was kind of when I first met him. But that was my first introduction to Mantis/Death.
Yeah.
Took the demo home that night, and it blew my mind because it was just so raw and so just, underground and dark, and I just loved it.
What was the closest you had heard to something like that at that point? Like, was there anything reference-wise?
Well, I guess maybe like Venom, some Discharge stuff, just the, darker, heavier shit like that. And I think we had heard some Hellhammer demos, that was big influence, but it was just in that vein of Hellhammer to me, just really dark, heavy, and raw. And, it was recorded on a boombox, for God's sake,
Yeah.
And, so that was my first introduction. So, throughout the next couple years, I, started playing bass and got into Massacre. But then we'd kept track of Death because, Chuck had moved out to San Francisco and put out a couple more demos and this and that. And so it blew my mind when the chance came up to actually join Death,
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, going from just kind of meeting him a while back to getting the chance to jump into it.
Yeah.
So I talked a lot to Rick about Leprosy and stuff. So once you guys got through that period and everything, Rick leaves the band or is, out of the band. What kind of situation were you guys in at that point? You had a band where you had two guys, writing together. All of a sudden, I know Chuck did most of the writing on Scream as well, but what was the headspace like? Were you guys like, we need to get someone now, or was Chuck starting to write on his own, or what was going on like during that like weird kind of in between?
I think we actually had maybe a song or two or parts of one song already from Spiritual kind of already done when Rick was still in the band. But we played Mexico City for 2 nights in a row after Rick left, and we got Paul Masvidal to fill in. And we weren't thinking, Paul's going to be in the band. We were just like, okay, so now we need to continue write. We continued to write Spiritual Healing, just me, Chuck, and Bill. And we knew, okay, we got to get another guitar player in here. So we tried a local dude named Scott Carter, he was a shredder. I think he was from a band called Tempter, but it just wasn't the right fit. So after about a month of rehearsing with him, 3 weeks or so rehearsing with him, I mentioned that I knew a dude that's a shredder that's into this kind of music, and his name's James Murphy. I explained to the dudes I knew him and I met him. He lived in Lakeland, Florida, but he was at the time he was jamming with Hollow's Eve up in Atlanta, and I had his phone number. I told Chuck, hey, I got his phone number. Chuck said, well, give me the number, I'll call him. So he called him, said, hey, we're looking for another guitar player if you'd like to come check it out, So James said, yeah, give me about a week to get all my stuff together. So he came down and, tried out, and it was like an instant cool fit, So we just started writing more, and hammered out the rest of the album there in Orlando at a mini warehouse. We would stay at Chuck's house like Friday and Saturday, come back on a Wednesday during the week and practice all the stuff. And
did you have to kind of, you guys were all in the band already, and then James came in. Yeah. Was he pretty familiar with this stuff, or did you guys have to kind of, give him the rundown?
Well, he was familiar with it. I mean, he knew the band. He actually came and saw us play a few times, and I first met him, I believe, sometime in 88. We were at a place here called Sunset, a little hole-in-the-wall club. and that's where I met him. Yeah, so he was familiar with the band Death. I mean, I don't know if he knew the whole discography. I mean, the whole, like, the songs and stuff, everything, but he knew what it was about and knew what it sounded like and everything.
And so, I mean, because, you know, you had this shift again, you know, like each album you shift, each Death album.
Yeah.
So was Chuck, because I know Rick had said, you know, Chuck was kind of hinting, you know, about trying to practice and do a little more with the solos and that kind of stuff. So when James came in, was Chuck kind of like, you know, go wild, or we're trying to kind of push things forward, or what was that kind of like direction-wise?
No, we didn't. We never said, hey, you know, don't do that kind of lead or don't do this or that. That's just how it was. I mean, that was just kind of an evolution of going. I mean, we were always, you know, even on that Scream Bloody Gore tour, we were listening to Watchtower and a bunch of, you know, technical metal and this and that. So I kind of think Chuck always loved that kind of stuff and welcomed some kind of, you know, I mean, James and Rick are totally different guitar players, both great at what they do. But when James came in, it allowed for a kind of slightly different variation of some of the riffs, you know, a lot of more scales and harmonies that he could do with James. And, I mean, James's leads, I'd never heard leads like that in a death metal band, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, I was like in awe. And still to this day, the leads on that album are absolutely amazing. So it was just like a great work environment once we started, and with James playing that way and contributing, he wrote some riffs too. And it was just a really nice work environment for about 3 or 4 months while we were writing that album.
Yeah, I remember when I talked to James, it was a while ago, but I feel like he was saying it was like everybody was kind of feeding off each other, because he would be coming in with some solos and Chuck would kind of get fired up, and because I know James was probably a better player at that time. So what was that dynamic like for you? Like, was it kind of like that?
Yeah, it was killer. I mean, you know, like I said, we all were trying to just play our best, obviously, and it absolutely was a killer environment because we felt like we were doing something really cool, and it was a little obviously different than Leprosy. Leprosy is, you know, really aggressive and heavy and dark, and there's some melody creeping on Leprosy. You can hear some of the parts starting to get that way, but it just kicked up another notch with James. Like that ability was there. He brought a lot of cool, if you want to say, fresh blood to the mix. But I mean, with him, his skill set, it allowed Chuck to do a little bit different stuff, and it did kick Chuck in the ass a little bit to try and perform leads better. I'll always say this: to me, his best quality is his song structuring, his rhythms he writes, songwriting, and vocal and lyrics. You know, leads. He's a good lead player. You know what I'm saying? But that wasn't his forte, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, he does good leads. That's not what I'm saying. But, you know, to me, his best thing was actually his vocal, songwriting, and lyrics.
Yeah.
You know. So, but when James came in, it definitely kind of lit a little fire under his ass and got him to, you know, buckle. Yeah. So it was great.
That's cool. And so, you guys, when you were writing, I mean, was it still everybody getting in the room to write and things like that, or people bringing their own songs?
Absolutely. Sometimes we would bring a riff or two to the band room, or sometimes just jamming. We would stumble upon a cool riff and work on that, you know.
During that time, I mean, it's still pretty early on, you know, but would you have thought that Chuck was going to keep going like away from that early death metal sound, or was that just like a big surprise once that started happening more?
I mean, at that time, I don't think we thought to ourselves, hey, this is really different than Leprosy. Are people going to like it? We just thought it was cool to ourselves, and we liked what we were doing, and it was just like a natural progression, which, I mean, me, Bill, and Chuck started writing for the album Human here where I live now in Dover, Florida, in a building right next to me. That's where 4 of the songs that are on Human were kind of born. So, and we could feel it even getting a little more technical even then, you know, so it just felt like a natural evolution.
Yeah. What about, by that point, I mean, you had a lot more death metal bands now going and coming up. What were you guys thinking, and what was Chuck thinking, like, about a lot of the other bands, especially bands that were probably being pretty heavily influenced by death?
There were some bands that we were into at the time, you know, obviously, I think Possessed at that time are kind of done with, but they were a big influence, obviously. But I mean, you know, Morbid Angel was just kind of starting to get their feet going and everything, but we were always kind of stuck in our own world. I mean, we would go see bands play and everything, but, you know, we just kind of just did what we did, and I wouldn't say a lot of the other bands coming up influenced us, but we definitely checked them out and were supportive of them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's obvious you guys were, especially each album they're going forward, so different. Definitely not doing what the other bands were doing, but I don't know. I just always think about like what that community was like. Like early on, you had the tape trading.
It
and
was
just
great.
What was
I mean,
if everybody was checking each other out?
There was always a show. I mean, it started really coming in. Like you had Executioner starting out early, and they were playing shows. And like I said, Massacre were playing shows, and then when Death came in, but Morbid Angel were playing shows early on. There was Massacre, Morbid Angel, Executioner shows that were going on, and there's a few other bands. A band called Dead. I mean, obviously, Nasty Savage were a huge influence on all of us. They were still playing shows, and Abundant Brutality, and all these bands were starting to do their thing. So it was very fertile ground here for a while. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. And then you guys got to do some touring on this, right? Because I know there's the story of the European tour where you guys had to go without Chuck, but did you guys tour it at all before that on this album?
Yeah, we did. We did 2 tours in the States for Spiritual. The first one was with Devastation. Then we had like 3 months off, 3 or 4 months off, and in those 3 or 4 months is when we started writing the Human album. Then we went out with Pestilence and Carcass on the second leg of that Spiritual tour.
Okay.
And both those tours were great. I mean, they were huge tours in the States. It was Carcass's very first tour in the States, and Pestilence.
Yeah, that had to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, so that's cool. So you guys did get to get those tours in there. I don't think I knew you guys had started working on Human before that, because it's just with the member change and everything. I mean, how much of what you guys did then carried over?
I think most of all the rhythms were still there, and he got the Cynic as his band for that album to record. But yeah, I mean, the 4 songs were pretty much written. I don't think any of them were like kind of missing spots, but it was like kind of skeletons of the songs, and I don't even think Chuck had lyrics to them yet, you know?
Right.
And we just kind of, in that time, just started working so we could keep moving, and then that second tour, the first tour had James on guitar, and then the second tour we used Albert Gonzalez from Evil Dead. He played lead on that tour. Okay. Yeah.
So, and then what... I don't, or what's his name? Rick mentioned it, but why did you guys have to go without Chuck? Like, was there a reason that he didn't want to go?
Well, it's, in the death community, I'm probably an evil, horrible person. But at the time, I was, 21 or whatever, how old I was. And it's like, we had signed contracts and we had this whole 9-week tour with Creator in Europe that had been promoted for months and months and months. And it was a huge tour, co-headlining. And right at the end of that second Spiritual tour, we had about a week off, and then we're going to Europe to do that tour. Well, Chuck had started acting kind of weird on that second tour, and by the time we got home, we dropped him off at home. We were going to get together and rehearse a couple times before we went to Europe. He just was AWOL. He was gone. No one could find him, And so, long story short, we got our booking agent talking with Creator's management, and we all agreed that we were just going to go over without Chuck, because Chuck, basically, I still have the paper here. He basically, wrote a paper saying that we're going to go over to Europe without him, and he's not going to be responsible for what happens, but he's staying home. We all signed it. He signed it. We never saw him. Through his mom, he signed it, and so he was just checking out of that tour.
Was there, he just didn't want to go, or? I
don't know. His mindset was, a girlfriend had just broke up with him, and I don't know. He was kind of getting a little bit tired of maybe the straight death metal stuff. I think he always wanted to do that Controlled Denied kind of thing.
Right.
He would get upset when he heard kids walking around, while we're sitting in our RV waiting to go on stage, if they were singing in death metal voices.
Okay.
But dude, these are your fans. They love your lyrics, whatever. But so we felt like we, had to do this because it was such a huge thing. You got 9 weeks of, it was like 40 dates. All the tickets were sold. A lot of the shows were sold out. Creator had their own crew, which were huge. So you're talking about, if that tour cancels, you're talking about all that going to waste. Their crew, these roadies, are not going to get paid for 9 weeks. It was a huge mess. So, and we were like, what the hell? So we basically, the drum tech, who was actually the drummer of Devastation at the time, I told him, he didn't even know anything was going on. He met us at the airport. I said, he's like, where's Chuck? I said, well, he's gone. You're going to sing.
Oh, man.
He's like, what the hell? And then Walt Traxler, he was a guitar player. He was in, he was going to play guitar, second guitar. I told him, you're going to be the main guitar player, dude, because Chuck's AWOL.
Yeah.
So we rehearsed in the hotel room for 2 days, kind of air drumming, air guitaring, and hammered out 10 songs. And that's what we did. We just felt we had to do that. I mean, you know, in hindsight, was it the best thing to do? I'm not sure. I mean, like I said, we felt guilty. There were so many people that had so many, their jobs were on the line, their paychecks for 9 weeks were going to go out the window. It was just a big mess. Yeah. And we just felt that we had to do this, you know. So we convinced their management that we could pull it off, and we did. I mean, musically it sounded great, it sounded good, but, you know, obviously vocally it sounded like a punk singer singing the death songs, but what can you do?
What did the fans think?
Well, I mean, at first, the first couple shows, they didn't know what was going on, and they didn't know what the hell was happening. But word got around the community, you know, that Chuck wasn't coming over to do the tour, that we had some fill-in guys doing it, and they seemed to be okay with it, you know.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't like to talk about it much just because it's, like I said, there's, you know, diehards that will probably want to, you know, run me over because of all that shit. But we felt at the time, Bill and I felt that that was just our best avenue to pursue, you know.
I mean, hey, that's a tough call. I mean, you don't want to bail on another band, but you don't want to.
In hindsight, it kind of lit a fire under his ass because he called up the Cynic guys and said, "Hey, I got an album written, and I need some help. Can you guys, you know, record it with me in the studio?" And that kind of kicked his interest up again, I think, because he was kind of getting a little complacent with what was going on, not because of the musicians in the band, but I think he kind of wanted to elevate himself a little more than just being considered a death metal band.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, I wish he would have went. It was great shows. We had a great time, and he would have loved it over there. But his mind was in a different spot, and you know, I've heard from people over the years, like, you know, some of his family members and like from Eric Greif and stuff, that maybe the tumor was starting to grow, and it was like skewing his thought patterns or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but you know, we felt we had to do it.
It's an interesting point. I mean, I work with doing therapy of people with brain injuries and things like that, and you know, tumors, and they'll have a surgery and this and that, and I mean, impulsiveness or different decision making. I mean, that stuff's a real deal with stuff like that. So you just never know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's an interesting way it unfolded, and I mean, you know, but I guess it is what it is, and it was always wild to me because it's like I know he took the band super, super serious, but I guess that makes sense. Like you said, if maybe he was getting a little burnt out on that sound for a minute, and then he kind of got recharged once he changed the sound.
Yeah. I mean, you hear over the years, I mean, he could be very, very stubborn, very hard to work with, as far as like working with promoters and booking agents and managers and that kind of stuff. Like if he thought that you were trying to get something over on him or dissing the band in any kind of way, like you were dead to him, basically. You know, so I mean, so that, you know, and it was all just because mostly he was just trying to do what he thought was best for his band, you know, and I get that.
Right. Yeah, he's a passionate dude, right? I mean, yeah. So then, then that was about it for you with Death. After that, obviously, you did the Massacre stuff, which I thank God for all that.
Yeah.
What about like just more recently, just to kind of finish up? I mean, I saw, at least online, you know, you guys did the Spiritual Healing tribute shows. I think Living Monstrosity, was that the name of it that you guys did? Yeah. How was that?
It was good. It was cool. It just came out of nowhere. You know, we got emails sent to us by a couple people that wanted to do the show, and they got permission from the family and whatever, and put a show together, and immediately Gus and Matt from Gruesome were the first people we thought of to do this with us, James and I. So we rehearsed a few times, and it sounded pretty good. It came together pretty well, and great reception. About 2 sold out shows and everything. And then, kind of out of the ashes of that, Rick just kind of proposed a question: would anyone want to see, a Leprosy anniversary tour of the album kind of thing? And that just instantly turned into, Matt and Gus and all of us got on board, and and so it's just kind of taken off and gotten tour dates and got a tour set up, and we've rehearsed it. We rehearsed the other day for the first time, and it's cool. Some of the songs Rick and I haven't played together since '88. So
yeah, that is cool.
It felt good. And I think it'll be a good tour. It's
I can't wait.
We're out there playing, celebrating the music of Chuck and celebrating Leprosy as the album, and we were part of that album, so it's only logical. So that's coming up in July 7th. It starts here in Orlando.
Yeah, I can't wait. I wasn't there. I never got to see those kind of shows. I never got to see Death at all. So something like that, it's going to be, ton of fun for people like me. So definitely looking forward to it. All right, man. Well, I'll let you go. I could talk probably for hours and dive into 6 Feet Under and Obituary and all the other stuff, but maybe we could save it for another day.
Sure. Okay.
All right, man. Well, enjoy your week. And like I said, I'm definitely looking forward. I'll be at the Detroit show and, seen you in Obituary many times, and I'm sure I'll be seeing that again. So.
Well, come say hi when you're there.
For sure, man. All right, man. Well, enjoy your day, and I'll talk to you later, man.